how do people know that they're conforming?
Look at the results that are in your life right now. Do they match who you think you are? If you were to bring in a new opinion, can that happen in your friendship group, or will you be cast out? I had been stuck in a very binary way of thinking, and I didn't even know. I was shown that those were values that were somewhat negotiable depending on who I was around. Those values weren't actually as embodied as I thought they were.
You have to express how you feel, but it's very, very difficult if you're not in a relationship where someone allows you to do that. But some people don't know they're conforming, Africa.
We avoid looking at our own lives because we're afraid of seeing what we already
100%.
know on some level. How many things are we telling ourselves we don't really need it, when actually I had just never allowed myself to even entertain that I get to experience something like that?
I want to share an example that I've never, ever shared before. I think I have to share it today.
Please. That is one of the most incredible and honest, and just the level of self-awareness that you need to have to articulate what you just did. That's going to be so powerful for so many people.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Mind, a podcast where I sit down every week with guests and discuss things from mindset, self-growth, entrepreneurship, and extraordinary stories. This week, I'm so excited to share this guest with you because she has become an incredible friend who has taught me so much. Brooke is a recognized mindset consultant, coach, mentor, speaker, and author who continues to inspire countless people to take ownership of their lives, break free from self-censorship, and break free from the mold being completely yourself. She has taught me so much, and her insights on navigating modern day challenges like cancel culture, identifying self-sabotage, have sparked important conversations around the world. Through her thought-provoking talks and writings, Africa has challenged us to reflect on how we show up both authentically and unapologetically every single day. This conversation is one of the most honest and transformative conversations that I've ever had, and I'm hoping that it might just change the way that you see yourself and the world around you. But before we get into it, I have to thank you all for allowing me to share this incredible platform with you, because we have finally hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. I cannot believe it, because you all know that YouTube has been such a big priority for me. We have poured so much effort into this channel this year, and I'm so grateful that you got me to 100,000 subscribers last year. And I just have a tiny little favor for those of you who haven't subscribed, and that is to, of course, press the like, follow, and subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening to this, because you have no idea how much it helps me to get incredible guests like Africa on the show. Thank you so much for always supporting me, watching me, cheering me on, commenting. I'm so grateful for you all. Let's get into this episode. Africa.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to Millennial Mind. This is weird for me because I always envisioned us to have this conversation.
Yeah.
But we've been friends for so long now that this is now weird that I'm saying welcome to Millennial Mind. I feel like you're on my podcast every time we meet.
I know.
Because we meet and we spend 5 hours together and we talk about the most craziest things and we have really deep conversations. So this is now weird. It feels a bit informal, and then I'm not being able to touch you.
That is true. You know what? I was thinking the exact same thing, because you're someone that I heard about for a very long time through a mutual friend of ours, Simon Salter. And meeting you, I remember the first time that we met, and it just felt like it was a catch up. It felt like I was meeting up with a friend that I haven't seen in a very long time, and we're just slipping back in. So I'm actually glad in a way that it's happened that way, where I have a baseline friendship with you that is quite deep. And then we get to explore the things that we do in the world and the things that fascinate us on a kind of wider level. I'm just so happy that we get to do this.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you wrote this book. Although I was like 1% jealous. Remember I told you, I was like, this book is everything that I wanted to write about. I think the reason why I love your work so much is I resonate with so much of what you say, right? And I think this book is so unique. It's so different from what everyone says out there. And I really want to deep dive into it today.
Yes.
Why did you call it the third perspective? And what is the third perspective?
I do also, for anyone watching or listening to this, I invite you to just intuitively think about what the idea of a third perspective might mean. To me, this is a book that was born out of me realizing that I had been stuck in a very, and I'm sure we'll go into the details, but I had been stuck in a very binary way of thinking, and I didn't even know.
Right.
I thought if you had asked me about 5 years ago what I value or what I think of myself as a person, I would have said that I'm open-minded, and that's a value for me, open-mindedness. I would have said that I'm a very honest, transparent person. I would have said that I'm open to difficult conversations, but I was shown, and for me that showing, if you will, happened in 2020, very specifically. I was shown that those were values that were somewhat negotiable depending on who I was around, depending on what the topic was, depending on what my level of tolerance was or the capacity that I had. So those values weren't actually as embodied as I thought they were. They were more desired. And I talk about that in the book, the difference between when you are actually embodied in your values, so you live them every single day, non-negotiably, versus when they are more desired. You want to be the type of person that is more open-minded, but it's actually more negotiable. So I realized that there were so many topics and ideas that I was just so terrified of exploring out loud, or questions that I was even afraid of asking, because I believed that my perspective was wrong. I believed that certain sort of things that I was wondering about, that if I raised certain concerns, it would be betraying my community. And I'll talk about what that means specifically. So there were all of these stories that I had that kept me in a very binary way of thinking. Is this good or bad? Is this the right opinion or the wrong opinion?
Can you give me an example of that?
Yes. Even though I have never over-identified with any political leaning. And by that, I mean, are you left-wing or are you right-wing?
Right.
And I think it's because I am an immigrant. So I don't have the same level of sort of political connection to this country, because it's... and I think for most people that are immigrants, they will probably resonate to this. You don't kind of come to a new country and grow up thinking, oh, I'm left wing. I'm so affiliated with conservatives or Labour or whatever might be in your country. But when you look at my values and what I stand for, they are considered to be left-leaning values, whether it's in respect to things like feminism or just what I believe economically, societally, etc. So when you're assigned that sort of identity as a left-leaning person, there are certain opinions that are also expected of you, right? Even whether it's the way that you vote, the kind of people that you listen to, the kind of opinions that you would have publicly, it's all kind of predetermined for you without you even knowing. So I found that some of my opinions, and they wouldn't even have to be anything huge. It could be anything at all. Me maybe thinking that someone from a different political party actually has a point about something, but people feeling like, wait, you're not supposed to agree with this person or to even think they're reasonable because they are right wing and you're left.
Right.
So I just started to notice things like that happening over time, where there were certain expectations of me, but I started buying into that and also behaving in the same way.
Right.
So in 2020 specifically, when there were so many conversations about race, so many conversations about medical decisions, because we were so deep in the pandemic and the vaccine was a big conversation at the time, I didn't have a strong stance specifically. I was just one of those people that was like, okay, with more information, I get to make an informed decision. I didn't have a strong stance on anything. But again, there were certain positions that I could see I was expected to take. And I remember writing in my journal in late 2020 that I feel scared that I'm not allowed to have a third perspective. That was the first time that I wrote sort of those words, stringing those words together, third perspective. I wrote it in my journal. And then I work with clients. I've been a coach for about 7 years now, a coach and a consultant. And I work with people that are struggling with self-sabotage and self-censorship. So that language, I realized, had always been present in the work that I do with clients, but it kind of came to the fore for me in late 2020. And then once I decided that I was going to write this book and turn it into something, I was having a conversation with my editor, And then I uttered those words again, the third perspective, and I just knew that this is what the book is. It's an invitation out of the binary.
Yes.
It's asking people to really, please never buy into the lie that you only have two options. Ever, 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 because there is so much else that needs to be explored. So that's like a sort of concise way that I can put forward where the title came from and a little bit more of the context, which I'm sure we'll dive into. But it was my declaration that I'm no longer going to force myself to fit into left, right, pro or anti, with us or against us.
I hope you can all see why we speak for hours on end, because even that, there's just so much I want to explore. I'm like, I need to talk to you about this, and this.
Yeah.
I want to pick up your book.
Please.
Okay. This is crazy, okay? Because people who watch my podcast will know what will be the number one thing I'd want to talk to you about, okay? Part 1, chapter 1 of Africa's book is conformity is not the answer, which is why you and I are just totally and 100% aligned. And I want to come back to that. But there are 3 things I want to be talking to you about today, okay? I'm going to read the chapters. I'm actually going to let you guess. That's a little test for her. Conformity is not the answer. Befriend the mob in your mind. No one left to cancel. You owe the internet nothing. Break free from either or thinking. Principles worth defending. Liberate your tongue. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Honest conflict or dishonest harmony. Unleash your inner maverick. Brave expression. A price worth paying. 12, enter the arena. So these are all the chapters of the book. I don't know if I should have done that to really tell everyone exactly what's in your book.
No, it's good.
But there's 3 things I really wanted to talk to you about today. What do you think they're going to be?
Oh,
Obviously, conformity is not the answer. We're going to deep dive into that one.
conformity is not the answer 100%, because I think that's where you and I meet, and we really just that's where you and I meet. Oh, this feels so tricky because it could be so many of them. Okay.
Asking her to be psychic here.
I will say...
And all of you comment actually in the comment section what you think I'm going to talk about today.
I feel like saying you owe the internet nothing simply because you're a very public-facing person. And I think you might have come to a point of really fully embodying, as I'm saying, that understanding that I actually owe the internet nothing. I get to be here and I get to do my work and I get to be loud.
I need to be doing that.
Yes.
I need to be. I need to realize that I owe the internet nothing. I should have talked to you about that today. I'm talking to you about what I'm comfortable with, but I should have talked to you about that today for sure.
Oh, which is interesting because maybe I'm going to give you these 3 chapters based on how I perceive.
Yes. That is interesting.
Yeah. And then the last one I would have said, the third one then, I would have said, brave expression, a price worth paying.
Oh, see, this is so interesting. I didn't pick those 2 because I think those 2 are the ones that I struggle with.
Oh.
But I've picked break free from either or thinking.
Yes.
Because I believe so strongly in that. And honest conflict or dishonest harmony.
Oh, that was going to be a 4th. If there was a 4th, that would have been.
But it's interesting because actually I think I need the ones that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I think it really is the thing that I just mentioned around, there's a way in which I perceive you.
Yeah.
In that you are very daring. You're actually putting yourself out there, whether you're afraid or not, whether you're uncomfortable, whether there are things that you're still working through. You show up every single week, and in between that, you're still showing up in different spaces and places, publicly and privately, and you're bearing yourself.
Right.
So there's a way in which, and even as your friend, when we sit and we have conversations, which are, again, a minimum of 4 hours, we need to stop blocking out entire days.
We really do. We just go on a retreat together to just chat.
So the way that I experience you're in your bravery. It's not something, of course it's not a destination. It has different points and variations, and our capacity is always at a different level. But it is something that you absolutely value and you live that out. So to me, the idea of you owing the internet nothing is based on what it is you actually do, and an understanding that I think you would have had to come to keep showing up in the way that you do.
How interesting.
And then brave expression being a price worth paying. I think it's a price that you pay often, you know, in a world of comment sections and opinions and thoughts. Even in relationship, we've had conversations about you not fitting the archetype of what's expected of you culturally. That is a price worth paying. So I think it's, I think it's how I experience you and my perception and understanding of you. I would love to explore, though, the chapters that you have chosen so that maybe we can kind of play with the different ones, because I'm very curious about what you're saying around the ones that I chose are the ones that you struggle with the most, or at least you think you struggle with those areas the most.
I think I know most about those two, which is why I chose them. But the ones you chose for me, I think I struggle with, which is interesting. So it's almost like I avoided those topics because I was like, nope, not discussing that on the podcast. But we'll dive into it. I want to start with the first one. Conformity is not the answer. When I opened that book, I saw that chapter and I thought, this is literally everything that I've been wanting to hear. For all my life, I feel like I have struggled because I've always subconsciously not conformed. And it's never been conscious. And you speak about this a lot, right? It's not that I wake up and I think, I don't want to do it that way. And that's the reason. You know, it's not like I wake up and I think, I don't want to do it that way, and this is a conscious decision, and I'm going to be difficult. That's not what I think. I don't want to conform. It's interesting I just said difficult, though. Right? I just said that. I don't want to be difficult because I'm not conforming. So it shows how deeply ingrained it is for me. But it's something subconsciously I've always done, whether it's when I was younger, and I remember I painted my nails black when I was like 11, and my auntie said to me, you look like a goth. And I was like, I don't care, I like it. Or whether I chopped my hair into a really like thin bob. And I remembered this distinctly when I was living in my old house. So I must have been under the age of 10. And I put my hair into these two pigtails. And someone said to me, your hair doesn't look nice like that. And I said, well, I like it. And I ran off. And I remember that moment. And it doesn't mean to say that when I challenge back, I don't go away and then cry. That's happened many times. Or when I'm going through something and I say one thing, it doesn't mean I don't feel the other. I think this is this distinction that people miss sometimes, is that often when I'm sharing something that I've been really brave about, I do feel really differently because it's very uncomfortable. And I think one of the biggest things that I've realized when reading your book is I have always not conformed. And I think some people, what they realize is, I don't even know I am conforming. So how do people know that they're conforming?
You know what, by the way, I really love just listening to you speak, and when you speak, because you ground it in examples and in your experience. And I think it allows for even just me, but anyone listening, to really get a full sense of what it looks like. Because the first and most important thing that you said there was that a lot of the time it's unconscious. Whether you realize that you have been conforming all of your life or you haven't been conforming, it's just unconscious, which is why I think personality and just who you are intrinsically as a person is a big part of all of this. But I think the exciting thing, and then I'll come back to your exact question, the exciting thing is that you can bring awareness to this, which is why the first pillar is awareness. And you can shift things around. Even if you find out that you have been conforming all of your life, you did want that bob, you did want those black nails, but you were like, oh no, I can't do it. No one else is doing that. That would be so weird, you know, but inside you have always wanted it. You can bring awareness to that and you're like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this since I was tiny. But I'm an adult now, so I get to do that. So there's a reversal that can happen, you know. And for me, I think I realized I was able to consciously be like, oh my goodness, I have actually forced myself to conform for a lot of my life. But the language of forcing is important because naturally I play outside of the lines. Naturally, as a person, that's just who I am. So for example, for me, I have two older sisters, one younger brother. And we're not so far in age, but even from when we were all quite young, I always felt that I was different. It was just a feeling. It was a feeling that was not overwhelming or anything like that, but it was just a feeling and an awareness that if you were to line all of us up, even if we're not doing anything or saying anything, there's just energetically something different about me, but they're all quite similar. And the older that you get and sort of character and personality starts to show, I really started to see that, I have sort of this thing, I have like a wildness within me, if I'm to put it in that way. And I know you do too, because our wild recognizes each other.
It's interesting. You and Mo both said this to me when I got on the.
Really?
Mo was like, "You're a rebel," and I was like, "No, I'm not." And I was like, "How can you say that?" And I was like, "I'm such a good girl." But then I'm like, "Am I?" I'm like, "I don't know." Define rebel.
Honestly,
But I think I am a bit.
There's like a wildness that I've always had as a child that was made more obvious because my siblings didn't really have the same thing. And it used to manifest from a young age in ways that were not really helpful. For example, there was a lot of lying. So for context, in terms of how I grew up in Zimbabwe. So I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. And I grew up in a home that had so many different dynamics to it. But one of the key dynamics was that my father was an alcoholic. He wasn't for all of his life, but by the time that I was born and growing up, he was an alcoholic, and he was very abusive at the same time. So I'm very grateful that I had my siblings, because we were able to create our own world within the world that we lived in. We were able to play and have fun. And I'm also equally grateful that we lived in Zimbabwe, where we could run and play, and you could climb trees, and you could go to neighbors' house. There was just like a freedom, like a physical freedom, even though in the home there wasn't a physical freedom. And unlike my siblings, well, I don't know actually, because I haven't spoken to them about this detail that I'm about to go into. I felt the shame of having a father that was an alcoholic, a father that was abusive. So when I would go to school, I would lie about what my father was actually like. I would make him out to be this wonderful, incredible person, even though that's not how I experienced him at all. And I mention that because I realized that from a young age, this sort of thing that I did out of survival became a thing that was kind of mischievous in a way, because I realized that through lying, I could create my own sort of world. And that's why I think there's a wildness to it that was not sort of supportive to me, but it was where I realized, oh my goodness, I can sort of play with reality, you know.
How interesting.
It's fascinating, but I really do think a lot of children that would have grown up in a traumatic home end up kind of going in that direction of creating a world of their own inside the home and outside of the home. But I would create all of these stories about who my dad was, not even in terms of material things, his job or anything like that, but his character.
Right.
How he treats us, how funny he is, how wonderful he is, etc. And I always wanted to escape. I always wanted adventure. I always wanted more than was within the confines of our home. I was always someone that, even from that very young age, and I'm talking about being 5, 6, 7, I always felt like, no, I don't want to be restricted to this house. I don't want, there's more out there.
Right.
You know, but my siblings were not like that. And I remember it feeling, because I could see how my mother was experiencing me, I could see that I was a problem child from a young age. I could see it. Not even just because of the lying or anything like that, but again, the energy and this thing of like, I want more. There is more. I want excitement and novelty. I even saw from a young age that I want novelty. I want adventure. I want sort of things that we don't have. That's kind of the energy that I've always had, and I could see from a young age. But again, these things, I wasn't able to be really aware of them until my 20s.
Right.
But by the time I was a teenager and we had moved to the UK, it was even in things like how I like to dress. I went through like a goth phase, like an actual goth phase, and an indie phase and rock music, because it's what I love and enjoy. And it was a time where it's not because I was watching TV and thinking, oh, I want to be like that. And there was no social media. It was just this thing that I have within me where I'm like, I just want to explore and be free. And I would play with my hair and dye it blonde. I had a Mohican and shave sides. And I'm talking about being like 12, 13, 14. And again, my siblings were not like that at all. They were just didn't really go out much, didn't really have kind of like a wild life outside of the home, very studious. And I was smart, but I was not book smart in that way.
Right.
I was like an artist. That's what I wanted to do. And we've spoken about artistry too. I just wanted to be a musician. I just, again, this wildness took so many different forms, but it was just so intrinsic in who I am as a person that I didn't even see it as being nonconformist at the time. It was just who I was and what I was drawn to and what excited me. And there were times where it was painful in that I didn't fit in to what was considered popular, because there was a part of me. And again, I don't know if anyone listening to this or even you are familiar with parts work.
Yes.
Right? And it's incredible because it's just this, on a basic level, it's this idea that there's so many different parts of you. Parts that want to fit in and parts that want to stand out. If we just look at it in that way, you're able to see it in so many ways. So for me, my intrinsic nature was to stand out, but my intrinsic nature also on some level, because of the biology of belonging, which I talk about, I wanted to fit in with my peers, but the things that I enjoyed, the things that I was drawn to were so niche that you can't really fit in everywhere. Yeah. So there were pains that I experienced growing up, even with my own siblings, because I didn't quite fit in. So it was a problem when you live in a world, in a society where you have to toe the line, especially if you're a girl. Yeah. There's certain expectations of you, especially when you're from a culture that has those very fixed ideas of gender and ways of being. But I really would say that it was in my 20s when I started to realize, oh my goodness, there is a pattern here and there's actually nothing to fix. I've always been this way. However, I need to start making sure that my nonconformist nature is not because I'm just rebelling for rebelling's sake. It's because it's actually who I am, and I can harness that energy and that way of being in ways that are actually supportive. Because I think for a long time, I was harnessing it in ways that were not very supportive at all. So I think if you're curious enough about your historical context and you look at it through a very honest lens, you can see whether it's just been more in your nature to conform, because it is how we're wired as human beings. But I think there is a sort of integrity breach that can happen where you force yourself to overly conform because you're afraid of standing out. Yes. Just look at your historical context. Or are you on the other side of your nature is that you're just anti-conformist and you're just kind of a very curious little kid and now you're just an adult that rebels. But maybe you've also gone past an integrity breach where now you have sort of worn it as a badge of honor that you won't even allow anything that is different or anything that is mainstream or anything that is more norm, because you sort of wear this nonconformist thing as like a shield, you know.
So true. This is so powerful and so interesting. And I want to share an example that I've never, ever shared before, which is, I think I have to share it today.
Please.
I've always said, if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, that I don't want a big wedding. I've said it to my parents, I've said it to my friends, everybody knows that. Right? Yeah. And for so long, I have felt that it doesn't align with me. I don't believe that you should have this grand state of affairs, invite hundreds and thousands of people to celebrate you if you don't want it. I'm not saying that if you want it, you shouldn't have it. But I do think that we as women have been told that the wedding day should be the most important day of your life. You should save up your whole life for it. You should take off your holidays for it. You should plan for it. You should have an interest in it. Right? And I think so often we're told that this is the utmost important thing. And because I don't believe it's the utmost important thing, I'm actually like, I don't want to use all my savings for my wedding. Right. I don't want to spend a whole year planning for it. I would rather invest my money in a podcast studio. Yes. Right? And I'm not saying that's correct. I'm saying that's me. However, my parents have a different perspective from me. Right? They have one daughter. And they are 60 years old. And what they have been told for 60 years is that giving away your daughter and hosting a wedding for your daughter is the most important thing. What they have in society is a group of friends whose weddings they've also been to, where they've enjoyed, and they want to reciprocate. So what do? I don't want the big wedding, and they want me to have it. And for so long, I said that I feel so personally against this because I feel like I'm conforming. And I felt so distressed about it because I said to my parents, you're making me conform. And they were like, why are you taking this so seriously? You know, why are you getting so worked up? And it was because I felt that I was being forced to do something that I really didn't want to do. And I was setting a bad example to everyone else at home. And it took me a long time to realize that there is a difference between conforming to yourself and to other people. I was just conforming to other people because I thought they're going to judge me because I've always said I didn't want a big wedding. So I was still conforming, which is why I was getting so worked up about it. By me not wanting to have a big wedding, right, and be so stubborn about it and say, there's no way I'm having it, I was conforming to this other idea. And it took me so long to work that out. And so we've come to a compromise. I also am somebody who really cares about my parents. I really care about my family. I want to celebrate with my family. And I look at it now as I never personally wanted a big wedding, but I respect the fact that my parents are never going to change their mind about this. This is one of the things that I'm going to let them have.
Yes.
And I had to accept that because I thought there's so many things in my life that I've said to them, I want to go traveling. And they said, we really don't want you to go. And I was like, I want to go. And they were like, okay, fine. And I was like, I want to live in London by myself. And they were like, we really don't want you to live in London by yourself. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And they were like, you need to find my iPhone on. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I feel suffocated. And they were like, okay, fine. So there was loads of things in my life where I didn't conform and they accepted that. And it was hard for them. And so by me doing this and saying, oh, I'm not going to let you have this, I was like, am I actually doing it for me? Or am I doing it because I've told everyone I don't want this big wedding and I'm now scared that other people are going to judge me? And what's more important to me? How my parents really feel or what society thinks? And it was such an interesting dilemma I was in because I thought, but this is how I want this for my wedding and it shouldn't matter and it is my day and la 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 la. And it was so all consuming. And I just remember thinking that what are my values? What do I care about? And if I have to, for 2 days out of my entire life, sit there with a room full of people, instead of having, 100, I'll have 400.
Yeah.
Is it the end of the world? Gosh. Is it the end of the world? And I thought, no. And I think so often we get confused with, I'm conforming to what society wants for me, rather than these are my values and this is what's important to me. You have to weigh up both. You can't just be stuck and say, I'm not having a big wedding and therefore I'm not conforming. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
But it took so long for me to uncover this. It was such a hard few months where I was toying with this idea of, I thought I'm not conforming, but I've been conforming this whole time to this one narrative, right?
I just love you. I wish I could just do a standing ovation and a bow because that is one of the most incredible and honest and just the level of self-awareness that you need to have to articulate what you just did. That's going to be so powerful for so many people. I can feel an excitement bubbling inside of me because it's just one of the most perfect examples that I've ever had. And it makes me think of something actually, a similar thing but different that I realized for myself a couple of years ago. I had grown up. And when I say grow up, I think for me, this was from around maybe 18 or 19 up until a couple of years ago, where I was saying, I don't really care about Valentine's Day. It's like a commercial capitalist thing, which is just blah, 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 whatever. And again, that aligned with my self-perception of someone that doesn't really conform to all of these things that society places onto us, places onto women, expectations onto couples. Why do we have to participate in all of these things? And then I was having a conversation with my partner, who's still a very good friend at the time. And we were just sort of unraveling this because he also had a similar thing around Valentine's Day.
Right.
And I don't know what ignited this thought, but it was in the same vein of what you just shared with us, where I was like to myself, Africa, is that really true? That you don't care about Valentine's Day or a man actually celebrating you and adoring you on this day? Or Is it because you have never experienced that level of adoration? So you've had to make peace with this narrative that aligns with who you think you are, right? And it blew my mind because I realized that I had done a similar thing with birthdays. Oh, I don't really care about my birthday that much. I want something small, nothing too big.
Yes.
Because on a capacity level, I couldn't fathom, and there's sometimes a self-esteem thing tied into this. And I know what we're saying is quite deep, but I trust that everyone listening to this and the people that tune into you get it. There can be a self-esteem thing to this where, am I worthy enough to have so many people in the room at my wedding? Yes. Am I worthy enough to have hundreds of people just showing up for me for that one day? Or do I have to create a new story that I can live with? I'm a low maintenance person. Why do I need to spend that much money on it?
Fine.
But could it be tied to a capacity issue? Can I hold that much joy and celebration in the room for me? Or has a part of me made myself think that, no, it's not really a big deal? Am I being too difficult by having such a fuss around me? Or can you hold that level of attention and adoration and people spending so much on you for that only day or two, right?
Oh, I think I'm going to cry.
Right?
The thing is, like, that's weird that you just said that.
Right? Because when I looked at it for myself, Shivani, I realized I had never experienced, even from a young age, a boy saying to me, I want to celebrate you on this day. Or getting that level of adoration and attention and someone spoiling me and someone just doing something for me just because they think I'm that wonderful, you know. And as I was growing up, I had to, again, and I'm going to repeat the words because they're very important, I had to create a story that I could live with. And that story aligned with who I had always been. I don't care about that. No, I want to rebel against that. I don't need it. How many things are we telling ourselves we don't really need it? It's a big deal for no reason. When actually I had just never allowed myself to even entertain that I get to experience something like that. So it's where that idea of conforming to my own self-perception, conforming to my own narrative. And then it's not just Valentine's Day. Same thing for birthdays. Can you handle being spoiled? Is it because it's never happened for you before? You've never claimed it out loud as something that could be possible for you. So now as an adult, you just say, no, birthdays are not that big a deal. I don't want anything. I don't need anything. Again, you're not conforming to anything new because it allows you to make peace with it. Because there's a vulnerability and a rawness to saying, I want people to show up for me on my wedding. I want to feel good. I want to feel beautiful. I want to be able to look in the room and see everyone that I know being there to celebrate me for that week or for that 2 weeks. I do want that. I didn't think I wanted it, but I actually do. You know, it's a very vulnerable thing, and it invites you to break out of that conforming for non-conformers for non-conformers' sake.
Right.
Right?
Right. Do you understand now why we meet for 4 hours? And this is literally what we talk about.
Man.
I don't even know how long it's been, but this is like classic. I knew we were going to be here for a long time. I should have booked out the whole day.
And we're just scratching the surface.
We're on the first chapter. I haven't even gone on to the second 2 yet. We're just gonna do the whole podcast on non-conformity, I've decided. This is really interesting. You talking about Valentine's Day, and you could see I was literally like, you were crying. Like, let me jump out. But I feel the exact same way. And I felt the exact same way until my relationship with Nikhil. And on Valentine's Day, he said to me, on our first Valentine's Day, this is a box of chocolates from my mum. I told you the story. And I was so annoyed at him. I was like, why did you get me a box of chocolates from your mum? Why didn't you get me a box of chocolates? Right? And it was in that, and I didn't say this to him, by the way, sorry. It was in my mind. But I realized that I'd gone on and on and on to him, that I don't really care about Valentine's Day. I don't really care about these things. Like, they don't really mean a lot to me. And it was a 100% a defense mechanism. And I told him after that, by the way, I think, and I recognized that, by the way, I said, I think I was really upset about that. And I know it's not your fault because I told you that I don't care, but I think I do care about Valentine's Day. And ever since that, he always gets me a Valentine's Day card. And I told him also the first time he wrote me a card, I like long messages. And he writes me such long messages in the card. I mean, he's not like he didn't in the beginning, but I did tell him that because I was like, I'm going to be disappointed if you write me a card to Shivani, have Valentine's Day, love Nikhil. So you have to express how you feel, but it's very, very difficult if you're not in a relationship where someone allows you to do that.
Absolutely.
Where you don't feel like you're in a safe space. Now, coming on to what you said about the wedding thing, and I could feel a little bit of upset, like I was triggered by what you were saying. By the first point, but not by the second point, which is interesting. The first point being about there being that many people in the room to celebrate you and being that many people being in the room to focus on you. I felt very uncomfortable because I thought, I don't want that. And you mentioned a point about being low maintenance. I constantly say that. I do think I am quite low maintenance.
You said that to me before, yes.
But I also think it's because I've been trained to be.
Yes, oof.
If you ask my parents, they will constantly say, the best thing about Shivani is she never asks for anything. I never ask them for anything. Like very rarely, you know, I'll never be like, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Can you make that for me? No, never. I'll just never do it. And I wear it as a badge of honor. I'm like, I'm the good girl because I'm not good in so many other ways, technically, but I'm still the good girl. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I think it's so interesting because I don't allow people to do things for me. And we've spoken about this. And for so long, I struggled with that in my relationship. I was proud to be so hyper independent. And I've said this so often is that now I'm with someone who I can ask for things for. It really has calmed me down. It's really allowed me to feel at peace. I'm not like that in other parts of my life with other people.
Yeah.
But in my relationship, being like the most significant relationship at the moment in my life, because I don't have kids and I don't live with my parents, I live with him. I don't know if I'm also allowed to say that. But I feel at peace with that. And I think it's so, this point about what are you conforming to is so powerful, but you have to have a lot of introspection. And you yourself will feel like you're in a frenzy.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
But some people don't know they're conforming, Africa.
It's something that I found to be very useful for me, where I was really grappling with this idea of, I'm saying that I'm a very open-minded person. I'm actually wearing this sort of cape of being a nonconformist in so many ways. But the results in my life are showing me that I am conforming because I'm attracting people that make it very difficult for me to change my mind. I'm attracting relationships that actually don't match the person that I believe that I am. So there's an incongruence there.
Yeah.
So it's something that I always say, and if anyone listening is familiar with my work, you would have heard me repeat this time and time again, and I will continue to, in that one of the best ways to see whether there's a contradiction, right, is to look at the results that are in your life right now. Do they match who you think you are? Yes. I think that's one of the best, that's one of the best ways to do it. Look at your relationship, look at your health, look at your financial situation, look at your purpose and the things that you do. Just, you don't have to do anything apart from look, right? Does it align with what you think you are? You're saying that you're an open-minded person. Okay, look at your relationships, just your friendships alone. Do they give you evidence of open-mindedness? If you were to bring in a new opinion or a worldview or want to explore different ideas, can that happen in your friendship group, or will you be cast out? Right? Even in your relationship. I think there are... We really avoid, and I get it, I have so much empathy for this, we avoid looking around us, you know, at our own lives because we're afraid of seeing what we already 100%. Know on some level, you know. But I think with where we have got to in this conversation so far, to me, you've revealed another layer of the conversation that I haven't explored enough, which is that idea of what happens when you conform to a somewhat expired version of yourself.
Correct.
I think that's where it gets even more interesting. And I think that's where a lot of people are, where you're holding so tightly to this version that people are used to, but you're used to this version of you.
Yes.
So you won't even allow yourself to evolve. You won't even allow yourself to take back some things that you thought were very important, but actually they're not that important anymore.
Right.
And place more importance on things that you thought were not that important anymore. So as you grow and as you evolve, your worldview and your values and your needs do. But if you have this rigid idea, I'm a rebel, I want to stand out, I want to fit in, you actually won't allow yourself to evolve. And I think that's where a lot of people are.
It's also holding two truths. So
Yes.
if I think about the wedding example, I still don't believe that I personally want a big wedding.
Yes.
Which is why for our civil, we're going to keep it really intimate and what we both want.
Oh, amazing.
Right? It's going to be something that like aligns to us.
I love that.
However, I can still hold the truth that I don't want a big wedding, but also know that my value of I want to make sure that I am not selfish.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I am open-minded. I want to make sure that I realize that this wedding is not solely and only about me. I can actually hold the fact that I understand that this is really important to my parents.
Right.
And they don't have very many important things left. My parents are 60. They don't have, apart from my grandkids, any more momentous moments in their life. And this is one of them. And do I want to take that away? I asked myself that question. Right? It took months for me to really uncover this.
Right.
Like, what do I want? And not what do I want because I want to be this role model to the world to make sure that nobody has a big wedding and they invest their money into like themselves and their work and their mission. But what do I as Shivani Power want? And I often tell people that we are so encompassed with what everyone else thinks. Even through this podcast, don't think about what I think. Don't think about what I think that you should think. Think about like what aligns to you. What's important for you? And I think that can only come with solitude.
Yes.
You know, for me, whenever I'm feeling a little bit uneasy or a bit confused about what I really want, and this happened with this, I either write out my feelings and I really figure out like what is triggering me so much. But an exercise that I often do is I pretend to play therapist with myself. You know, as kids, we pretend to be like mummies and daddies.
Yes.
As an adult, I really do pretend to be my own therapist because I ask myself questions that I'm so scared to know the answer to. Right? And if I ask myself those questions like when I'm journaling, they're not as explicit.
Yes.
So I often pretend that I'm this like crazy therapist and I ask myself these questions and I always have the answer. And I think so often we don't align to ourselves enough because we don't believe we have the answer. But you always have the answer to your friend.
It's true.
Right?
It's true.
So why don't you have the answer to yourself? How do you uncover that feeling if you're conforming or you're not? Is this what I want? Is this what someone else wants? How do you decide for that?
Sometimes it's I really enjoy writing and actually seeing my thoughts and my opinions about myself and other people in the world. It really works for me in my brain when I can see it on the page. Similar to what you're talking about. That idea of playing therapist and just sort of giving myself a prompt and then just seeing what comes through. But in a kind of interactive day-to-day, moment-to-moment way, something that I have been paying attention to more is my somatics, how things actually feel in my body.
Okay.
Because I've really come to learn, and we were actually having a very brief conversation about this earlier, that there's so many things that you can't intellectualize your way out of or into. Sometimes you actually have to feel things in your body to know whether what you're saying is true or not true. So I've really come to learn that there could be things that I'm saying to a partner or to a friend, saying yes to something. A very simple example is you get invited to an event or something is happening. And you know, because you are yourself and you have been with yourself for that week, you know that you're absolutely exhausted. You know that you don't have the capacity. You know that you have nothing left in your own tank to give. But you find yourself habitually saying yes. That's a big one for a lot of people, especially women. You find yourself habitually saying yes to things that you actually don't have the capacity for, because there's more discomfort in saying, you know what, I'm not really feeling up to it this week, but let's see if we can do it another time. Because you feel as if you're letting people down. Because a lot of people have this underlying thing of, but I'm letting people down. Let me just say yes and just, it will kind of go away. You can feel in your body, once you've said that yes, and you have this kind of, whether it starts as a sort of commentary in your mind, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I know I really don't want to go, but I'm already tired. But your body often tells you, whether it's in your heart rate going up a little bit more, or you just kind of feeling like a sinking sort of feeling in your gut. A lot of things either happen in your gut or they happen in your chest, or some people might get a tingling of fingers or something like that. But I think when you start paying attention, especially for those of us that are constantly in our minds anyway, when you start paying attention to the somatic experience that you're having, the in the body experience, that can give you a sign as to whether things are actually aligned or not. So sometimes when you say your yes, and you actually feel grounded in it, and you feel good, or you say no, and you feel grounded in that, that can give you a clear idea. But I think we're very neck up people.
Yes.
And I think we think we can think ourselves into a decision, intellectualize ourselves into a decision, analyze ourselves, default ourselves into a yes or a no, and just completely neglect what the body is actually trying to communicate.
It's also awareness. It's made me think that how many times has someone cancelled a plan on me and I thought, thank God.
Oh my gosh.
And so an exercise that you should do is look at your calendar.
Yes.
And look and see which of these plans, if someone cancelled, would I say, thank God. That will tell you the plans that you really want to go to. That will tell you where your intention is. And I think so often we ignore it. I must go to that because it's going to get me this. I should see that person because they're going to tell me about this or introduce me to this person.
Yes.
I must go to this dinner because I committed. You don't want to go. You have one life. Why are you going?
Yeah.
But I struggle with this a lot with a friend. And I actually want to do a bit of role play because I've started to do role play in this scenario and I think it's quite fun. On this podcast, I mean, and it's quite fun. Often we feel, especially if we are healers as people. I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about different types of people. And I think so often people who are healers, people pleasers, the ones that always want to give, right? They often feel stuck. They feel that I just want to keep the peace. And I have a friend like this. You know, she will never, ever be confrontational with anyone. Whatever they want to do, she'll do. And sometimes I look at her and I just want to shake her. And I'm just like, just say what you want. Why won't you say what you want? And she's like, because I want to keep the peace. One example I was talking to her about was gifts. And she has somebody in her life who constantly buys her gifts every year. Not constantly, like every day. But buys her gifts once a year for her birthday. She never likes them. And she keeps saying, thanks so much. And I said to her, why don't you just say you don't like them? And she was like, because they've put loads of thought into it. They do really care about me and love me. And they spent quite a bit of money on it or what they can afford at the time. So what I don't want to say is I don't like it. And they say, suggest an alternative. And it's more expensive than what they've given me. Or they say, why don't you just choose something? And then it's like lost that meaning because I quite like it that they're buying me a gift. So how would you approach that situation with someone? Let's say I'm the friend and you're the one that's been given the present, with compassion, with kindness, without feeling that you're a bad person, because you're also just super kind. I would just be like, I don't like the gift. Keep it for yourself. I'm just joking. Take that back. I mean, the example I actually always give is like, I'm the most annoying person to buy gifts for. I'm like Rachel from Friends, so just make sure you keep the receipt. And then people know, you know? Also, I'm really thoughtful, so if you know me, you will get the present right. Just FYI. It's not that hard. True. Just get me a crystal, you know?
You know what? This feels layered to me. It feels layered, but I'm going to try and sort of simplify what I think in this scenario. The first thing that I would say is that we need to realize that there are different ways to communicate something that is classed as like a uncomfortable conversation, like a difficult conversation, or even this feels more like a vulnerable conversation. I think there's a vulnerability to it.
There is.
You know, I think there's this idea that if you are to express yourself bravely and say what it is you need, you have to do it face to face right then and there.
Okay.
I don't think that's true. And I think this can offer relief for so many of us because we need to realize, again, if we move out of the binary of you either do it face to face or you don't do it, there are different ways in which you can do things. I'm thinking in this case that this feels so vulnerable for the person because they've allowed for it to happen year after year after year.
Yes.
So the idea of sort of just saying it right then in the moment can feel very abrupt and sort of random to the other person because they're like, wait, but every year, it would just feel a little bit too much, which I completely understand. So what I would recommend is that I think this is where a really well-crafted text can be really good, or even a voice note, okay?
You love a good voice note.
You're away. I love a good voice.
I'm always like 9-minute voice note. I'm like, okay, Africa. Then I have so many points that I want to say to you. It's really impossible to reply.
I know.
Anyway, sorry.
We need a notepad. Sometimes you actually need to have a bit of distance from the situation, even if it's just a moment, or the person goes home and blah blah blah. Even if it's your partner, you live together, maybe they're at work when you send this voice note or text.
Oh, okay.
But an opener that I would use and do use for myself, even when I've allowed for things to go on for such a long time, and I'll give you a very specific example of when I have done a similar thing in a different way. I always start with, this feels a little bit vulnerable, but I'm really going to allow myself to say. So I own what the thing actually feels like for me. So it removes that charge that comes with something being sort of out of the blue, if you will. You don't just launch into the, by the way, I really don't like these. Again, get rid of this idea that it has to be done in a very singular way. I start with taking ownership of what it is that I feel. Always, always, always. And I think having that distance and text and voice note allows for your nervous system to be a little bit grounded, so you're not trying to have the difficult thing face to face and handle someone else's emotions in real time as well as handling yours in real time. So I think separation can be very good for difficult conversations, unless you're breaking up with someone, which I think it has to be face to face, which can be something else we'll talk about. But I always start with, and this is what I would do if I was the friend, this feels a little bit vulnerable for me right now, but I just want to be honest about something. So what does it feel like? It feels very vulnerable. What am I about to do? Say something that's very honest. So owning those things can allow for you to talk about something that might have been happening for even a few years, you know?
Oh, interesting.
It just creates a bit more space because you're like, you know what? I just want to be honest. And then I would just express the gratitude, you know, the things that you were saying to me, that the person has put a lot of thought into it and a lot of money. So you acknowledge those things. I know that you've put a lot of thought into these gifts and money. And it's part of the reason why I felt kind of uncomfortable telling you that I don't really need this kind of thing. And then go into what it is you actually need or what it is you actually would like. And then I would maybe invite the person to a longer conversation if they want to have it. So you don't need to launch into the entire thing via text.
Right.
To say, I'm more than happy to talk about this when you come home, but I just wanted to be honest with you. And again, I'm so, so grateful. This really is beautiful. But I feel like I haven't been entirely honest about my needs and how I like to receive things, or my love language or whatever it might be, because it sounds like it might be a love language thing.
Right.
I don't know. But I think that's what I would do. So it doesn't have to be a very long thing that you do back and forth via text. But I think there's something to be said for taking ownership and saying that you need to be honest about something. Name the thing that you need to be honest about. Actually, before you do that, express the gratitude that you need to.
Yes.
Then name the thing and say, you know what, but I'm open to talking about this properly, face to face.
I want to challenge you on that,
That's sort of
though.
what I would do. Please, please, please.
The reason I want to say that is because I think for someone like you and I, that seems very normal and comfortable.
Yeah.
For someone who's perhaps introverted and has never expressed how they felt, that for me, if somebody also messaged me that I just want to talk to you about something, I'd be like, oh my God, it's like a big deal. Like you've made me, like I just bought you a plant pot. And you're like, I don't want the plant pot, you know? Or, you know, let's talk. I did say something expensive, though, to be fair. So actually, let's talk about this.
In that context.
I bought you, I just bought you a bracelet for your birthday. That was like, you know, however much. You could have just said to me, it doesn't fit. Why do I have to say, I want to be honest, I know this is uncomfortable, I don't say this to you. Why can't I just lie and say it doesn't fit, I'm allergic to it, the bracelet, and maybe something like it's too tight for me or something like that. I don't know, it keeps falling off. Yeah, it doesn't fit.
To me...
Isn't that easier?
To me, choosing... You know what's so interesting? That's the path most people would take.
Yes.
That is the
Why?
path most people would take. But the reason why I see that as a form of self-sabotage, because everything that we're talking about here is in the context of self-censoring, right? Correct. Where you're not saying what it is that you truly feel and believe and needs, right? You're not saying your needs because you think you're going to get into trouble, and it's not a conscious thing.
Correct.
You're going to get into trouble, you'll be rejected, you'll be abandoned, you will be too much, you're too difficult, etc. But they all come down to rejection and abandonment. I'll be abandoned for who I truly am if I put this forward. If in that scenario, you're aware that there's this sort of fear, and again, somatically, you get a lot of anxiety around this thing, oh, but I need to tell them, but I won't, you know what, I'll just say the bracelet is too big, or let's...
Right.
You're at a crossroads because you're aware of what's happening at this point in time. Let's all just be the adults that we truly are and admit that a lot of the time we are aware. We come to a point of being aware. Once you do something enough and you're experiencing that discomfort and anxiety, there's an awareness that you have.
Agree.
You know, you might not be able to articulate exactly what it is, but there's an obvious discomfort in your body and your being, right? There is an awareness. You're at a crossroads. If you choose to continue lying, which is what self-censorship is, that is a form of self-sabotage. You're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the very same thing that you're trying to avoid, discomfort and conflict, you're just creating it within yourself. So there's no external conflict. You don't have to have the difficult conversation. And the reason why I do think it's a difficult conversation in the example you've given is because this is not just about the bracelet and gift giving. This is historical. There's a fear. There's a fear that this person has, and they've been repeating it all of their lives. It's just manifesting in different ways in gifts. It's probably happening at work. It's probably happening with friends. It's probably happening elsewhere. Probably happens on the street when a stranger steps on their foot and they say, oh, I'm sorry. Instead of saying, instead of accepting the sorry from someone else, they apologize.
Right.
There's something historical. That's why that text or that voice note would say, you know what, this feels quite vulnerable and I have to be honest about something. This might just seem as if it's about the gift or whatever, but it's actually about something more. So I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. You take ownership of your historical context. Because if you just choose to lie about the size and what I promise you, you'll be doing that for the rest of your relationship. And I don't even know if that relationship will last. If you're continuing to do, because where else are you doing that? Are you doing that in sex, in your relationship too, where you're having uncomfortable, unfulfilling sex because it's too much to say, actually, this doesn't feel really good, or I'd love to try something else.
Interesting.
I appreciate when you do this, but I really want to try this. Because if you can't do it with the bracelet, I promise you, you're not doing it in the areas that matter most.
That's so powerful. But also one more question to challenge.
Please.
Some people are okay with living their life like that, which I didn't know. Some people are genuine. I had this conversation with another friend, and she just said, well, not everybody wants to challenge everything all the time.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't understand.
Yes.
Why not?
Yes.
I find it very difficult to lie about a relationship I have with someone. If I don't really like you, I find it very, very, very difficult to pretend I do. And I feel it because I feel like I'm a liar. And I actually value that more myself than what society thinks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Let's say we met and I didn't like you. I would feel more uncomfortable knowing that I was like, oh, hi, how are you? I actually think physiologically I would be able to do that. But I'd feel more uncomfortable doing that rather than ignoring you and everyone thinking Shivani's a bitch. I'd be okay with that because I'm like, I'm not lying. But some people feel more uncomfortable the other way. They feel like I would rather feel like I'm saying hello to you and be fake with you than completely ignore you. And that's actually the third chapter. We missed the second one out. But the third thing I wanted to talk to you about.
But it's all woven in.
Of course.
I would say it's all woven. Can I also say something about what you just said? And I don't know if I would even call this a challenge, but it's just an observation that I just had as you were speaking. In that example you've given has a lot of absolutes and binaries in it as well.
True.
This idea that if you don't like someone, you can't be civil. Because why do you have to ignore them? If you don't like someone, what does that really mean? Is it because you've had conflict with that person, an argument with that person, or their energy is just a little bit off and your personalities just don't mesh?
Yes.
Does that mean with all of those things you ignore them? Or is there an instance in which, even if it's someone you've had conflict with in the past, you can still be civil. You can say hello and kind of move
course.
on. Because there's more that you have to hold and sort of maintain. It's the thing that we're saying about being non-conformist. I'm not going to conform to a sort of
I'm not going to be fake. Yes.
Because I don't think it's necessarily fake. I think there's a behavioral flexibility that we need to be able to say, you know what, you and I had conflict 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but I don't hold that within me. I'll say hello. If you don't say hello back, that's absolutely fine. It's not being fake. It's me being civil and me knowing there's nothing really huge to hold.
But also, sorry to interrupt you there. It's also my values. You know, like I said with the wedding.
Yes.
My values are not to be like you.
Yes.
My values are not to cut you off and do that. But you're right, in that example I gave, completely absolute.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it's like, I know this person probably thinks I'm being fake by talking to them, but my value is to always be kind to anyone who's horrible to me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just giving that as an example. I'm not saying that I'm this all righteous person.
No. I completely understand that. And I think everything we're saying essentially comes back to this idea of everything is context dependent.
Yeah.
You know, because for me, I've had to be in rooms with people that maybe loudly rejected my work and were saying things on the internet about it, made assumptions about what my position was. And now we're at events together and I just will see each other and I will kind of just smile and I won't feel compelled to say hi or I remember what you said in 2020. Like it's not, you know, but I think it's the energy that I carry in myself. It's not an anti-energy. So I think that's what I'm talking about here. Maybe it's not about saying hello, but I think it's about knowing that you don't have to be in that anti-energy in order for you to feel like you're not being fake, you know.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think sometimes it's an energetical thing. And then to specifically what you were saying about people that are like, yeah, I don't need to challenge anything. I'm fine.
Yeah.
This might be very just simple and maybe might be an underwhelming response. But what I have realized in my work and what I'm doing and with my mission with this specific message, I am not in the business of convincing you. I'm just not. I will not convince someone that liberating their tongue and their mind is best for them. I think a lot of us have to discover it, and we'll discover it when we really hit a crescendo or when we hit a rock bottom where we're like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't continue to lie to myself in this way anymore. I keep on attracting relationships that are not fulfilling. I'm not growing. My opinions haven't evolved since 2002. Like, what am I doing? I keep on attracting people and relationships that show me a very different side of myself. I keep on going to family gatherings and giving the same opinions that I did as a teenager. I don't even feel like I can speak my mind. And I will say this, if you are okay with that, so be it. I will not convince people that it's what they need to do, because if there's anything that I've come to realize is that a lot of the time you have to go through a level of internal chaos, internal conflict or adversity or some kind of pain to be able to actually shift your values or reprioritize or place importance in other things. And I think there are people that still believe that there are more benefits to self-betrayal, and there are those that are like, actually, this is no longer benefiting me anymore. So I don't waste my time anymore in sort of trying to convince people, because I think there's a point in which a person will come for themselves in some way. Even if a seed is planted through a conversation like this, maybe people are like, well, good for you, African Shivani, you know, blah, blah, blah. But a seed is planted through conversations like this. And I think that's where the power lies a lot of the time.
Interesting.
But in trying to convince, I just won't do that anymore.
I think I'm actually the opposite of you like that. Do you know that?
Tell me.
I think that I think this is also my flaw, is that I really want people to feel it, because I'm like, you're going to break through. Like, it's so important you do it. Like, just try, like, push yourself, and like just don't do that because you don't want to do it, you know? And I think so often I find myself being this rescuer and this obsession with, I must rescue you from this.
Right.
And I recognize this more and more. And it's almost that, why do I have to say something? Why can't I just let them be?
And you know what? It's a really useful trait to have if it's just channeled a little bit differently, in the sense that you invite more people in. And I think this is what I have been able to do. You invite more people in. And I think you actually do this. Maybe you're not giving yourself enough credit for it in this moment, but you invite people in by being, not by preaching.
Correct.
And you see this with religion. You see this with things like veganism. You see this with feminism.
Right.
You see this with movements.
Correct.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
And sort of identities that people hold really tightly. When someone, has been saved and now they're religious, they want everyone to know about the power of God and they want you to understand it. But actually that repels people. You have a message that is important. You have a message that is worth hearing. But if you're preaching and lecturing people and telling them that they need to be doing this, it actually repels and alienates the people that need it most.
Right.
And I say this because I learned this lesson in sobriety very early on, that when I got sober 8 years ago, I was like, oh my, you can feel this without drinking. I needed everyone to understand how amazing it is. But then people are like, okay, we get it.
Yeah. Shut up about it now.
Yeah. And then very quickly, I think about 6 months, by 6 months in, I understood that, okay, this is my journey. This is my thing that I'm experiencing. But actually, in sort of wearing it as this thing that everyone needs to do, it just makes people not want to listen. It makes people tune out. Whereas when I just started living and embodying my sobriety and partying and doing what I wanted, people are like, wait, you're sober, you're raving right now and you're sober. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh my, that is more attractive. It's more magnetic.
So true.
And I think it's the same with conversations like this. Just, we're being seen having these conversations. We're being seen getting it wrong or getting it right out loud and not shaming ourselves.
Right.
That is far more attractive than saying, you should X, Y, Z.
Just so right.
We're giving people options and saying, do it or don't do it. It's fine, but I'm not going to convince you.
I think what I mean is when somebody comes to me and they say, but it's fine, I'll just do that. I'm like, why are you doing that to yourself?
Yes.
And they're saying, well, it's not a big deal. I'm like, did you say something? And they're like, I didn't. And I'm like, why didn't you say something? And I think reflecting on what you've just told me, though, sometimes maybe it comes across as judgy. So maybe I should say it in a different way instead of, why didn't you say something? And instead of saying that, did you feel a little bit upset that you couldn't say something?
Yeah, I love that because I definitely do that. I listen.
And especially with someone close, you're like, stand up for yourself. I love you so much. I don't want you to be like a pushover.
Absolutely. It's no secret or surprise that you and I are those friends that are like, if a friend comes, you're like, there's a reason we are.
I'm a pusher. I say this all the time to my friends. I'm like, I'm not going to be the one that's not going to push you.
Me too. When my friends come to me, especially my friends, like my close friends, they know I'm not the enabler. Yeah. We all have our positions in the group.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to call if you want to have your shit enabled. Yes. Because I will tell you.
Yeah.
I will tell you.
My friends the other day were like, Shivani always has an answer to everything, doesn't she?
I will tell you. But what I've learned, though, is that because my mind, I'm very solutions focused immediately and very analytical, intellectual. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They don't want to be advised immediately.
Correct.
So sometimes I go straight into logic and rationale when actually the person just needs to be heard. And something that I had to unravel within myself is that hearing them and just being there to listen does not mean I'm enabling, because I think I had this sort of kind of mixed up that if I just listen and I don't give it to you straight, I'm enabling. But actually that was not the case. Be with their emotions and then let the logic and rationale come a little bit later. That's what I had to realize. And then I also learned, which is why I wrote the chapter on listening, the big focus on sort of listening, because that was a big learning for me too, that I know that I have, solutions that can be useful. I know that I have an awareness and understanding of the self, et cetera, but there's a time and a place. There really is a time and a place. And something that I do is that and people have probably heard this advice from so many other people, but I will just ask the person what they need in that moment.
Yes.
Do you want advice on this, or do you just want me to kind of listen? And then I will launch, because I am a launcher and I'm not going to change that. I think there's very few people, especially in the time that we're in, very few people that are willing to still, from a very loving place, just tell you the truth about what they're seeing and experiencing. Even when I was talking to you the other day about something personal, and you were like to me, Africa, you told me the same thing 6 months ago. It's even in things like that. You weren't being harsh or anything like that, but it's again breaking me from my story. Because when you're telling someone something that's happened or happening, you're in story. You're telling a story, and then this, and they did this and that. You need people that are like, you said the very same thing to me 6 months ago. And then it allows for me to be like, oh my goodness, I'm in the story. I'm just repeating the story. So I guess there are ways in which we can still be those people that are able to be direct, but I think there's an intricacy to it.
I honestly just love everything that you said, because a question that I always ask, because I'm a very solution-based person. I don't actually think that I'm someone that will hear you out and not give you a solution. I think it's impossible sometimes for me.
Yeah, me too.
But if you are a solution-based person and someone comes to you with a problem, the question you should ask them is, do you want sympathy or do you want a solution? Or do you want both?
Yes.
Because so often, some people just want the sympathy. They want to tell you that they've cheated on their boyfriend and they want you to sympathize with them because their boyfriend was an abuser. He was horrible. He was a narcissist. He was manipulative. They don't want you to tell them that regardless of all those things, you should have done that.
Yes.
And it's very difficult for me sometimes to be in that position. I've been in that position where someone's come to me, they've done something so wrong, but they've got a million reasons for it. And I've had to intellectually think, okay, if I was that person, I would probably be feeling a lot of shame right now. And I think she's masking by saying all of this stuff just to make herself feel 1% better. So I'll let you feel 1% better the day after you've cheated. But 3 days later, unfortunately, I am the friend who is going to call you and tell you that regardless of all those things, you shouldn't have done it. Because that's not who you are.
Yes.
And I know you better than that.
Yes.
I'm not going to be that friend that says, it's okay because you were horrible. He was horrible to you.
Me neither.
Because that's actually me lying. And I think so often I find it very difficult to just go into the sympathy base, but I've had to ask myself this question as well. What are they telling me? Do they want sympathy? Do they want a solution? Because I think, and I'm sure you resonate with this too, when you give a solution, you feel great. I feel great giving someone a solution. I'm like, wow, I have just solved a problem for you. And great, I'm a great problem solver. The other day, Nico called me and he was like, I have this huge problem. And he was like, and I was like, tell me. He was like, you're not going to be able to. And I was like, try me. And I solved it for him. And still, like 5 days later, I'm like, I can't believe I solved that problem for you. I'm so happy. And he was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. But, to be fair, he's like, yeah, I'm so happy you solved it too. But I think there's so much joy in solving problems. And I think we all feel happy when we solve problems.
Yeah.
But we feel happy. They don't feel happy.
100%. I think it's and this is why I just love you, and we resonate and connect so much, because that has been one of my biggest learnings this year, that having a solution, kind of a solution richness to me as a person is amazing in the work that I do. It's amazing out there in the world in my ideas, etc. However, it's not always useful in intimate relationship. It just isn't. Because I remember a very specific moment with my partner where we were on the phone and he was putting forward a problem, something that he had been experiencing, like a dissatisfaction in something. But similar to the thing you said to me about, you said this to me 6 months ago, I was saying to him, I was pointing out that he has been telling me this since I've known him. I didn't launch into that straight away, but it was something that I mentioned. You have been sharing this with me since I've known you. So I'm curious as to what would you like to sort of do around it, etc. I was still had a softness within me, but I was going into solution. And he was still listening, and I was putting forward different things and different options and ideas. And I think I was speaking for maybe about half an hour. He was still kind of being like, okay, etc., etc. But I could tell that in his tone, he wasn't feeling better. And I started getting frustrated because he wasn't feeling better, and I'd put forward so many different options and ideas. And then I said something along the lines of, well, was that helpful? Can you let me know if that was useful or whatever? But I know what was happening was that my ego had taken a blow, because I'm more used to, again, especially in the context of my work, putting forward a solution that actually gives someone some kind of insight and a like, thank you. So there was something very egoic about it, praise, but I didn't get a praise or feeling like I had fixed something in that situation. So I started to feel annoyed and frustrated that he wasn't feeling better when I had just given, but it's not what he needed.
So true.
It's not what he needed. And we ended up having an incredible, enlightening conversation about the fact that he just wanted me to remind him of his power. He just wanted me to remind him who he is. He just wanted me to listen. That's all. That's all he needed. It's not because he had a lack of solutions. Actually, the reality was that he was in overwhelm of the different options he could take. And I was adding more information on top of information. So that was very enlightening for me, because I realized, oh my goodness, sometimes this launching into solution and fixing, and I would have never seen myself as a fixer before. But now when I look at the work that I do in the world, it is what I do. But it doesn't always work in intimate relationship, because sometimes what people need is something that is more intangible and primal and softer, and just a container for you to hold them in that moment, and give them the benefit of the doubt that if they wanted solutions, they would fucking ask you a lot of the time.
Honestly, it's, you know why I realised that we hug each other so much when we're talking? It's because there's so many times I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I mean. It's too much. I really, honestly, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that so often when you're giving advice to someone, you're actually overwhelming them with all of the different things that they've got. Imagine someone saying to you, I'm so stressed out with this, this, and this. And you're like, well, you can do this, this, and this. They're like, I'm so stressed out. Like, why are you giving me more? And it's such an interesting thing that you just said there. I think I do that all the time. And also the other thing I recognized when you were speaking, that you can make the other person feel like they're stupid for not seeing something so obvious. Because when you're in such a vulnerable situation and you're explaining, like, I've got this, this, and this, and the other person's like, solution, which is, okay, well, why don't you just do this? Your immediate response is like, don't you think I fucking thought of that? Like, don't you think I fucking tried that? Even if you haven't, you're going to be in this defense because they've so quickly solved your problem. It might make you feel stupid.
Wow. That's exactly it. And he didn't say those exact words, but I can see it. I can see it, and it makes me see it in so many other areas as well. Me too. Which is why with all of these things, there's a light and there's a shadow, because everything that we're talking about, you could also class it as we're expressing ourselves courageously and bravely and assertively. And I write a lot about assertive expression. Yes. Just saying what it is you see and being honest about it. But it's an art form. There's a level of refinement that's required to really, this idea of everything is a case by case. If there's one thing anyone takes from this conversation, even me as a reminder, it's just that. It's a case by case. You can't approach every conversation, every interaction in exactly the same way. Even if you think you are righteous in that moment, even if you think the other person doesn't have a clear idea and I do. I think it's a constant dance of actually paying attention to what you're working with and who you're speaking to, because a lot of the things that I see and are seen by the world as my gifts can also have shadows if I'm not using them in the right way. Right?
Every time I'm like, this point is one of the most important points I want to mention. The gifts that you see in me, someone else sees as a flaw. I'll give you an example. Some people see me on stage hosting a workshop and they think, you're so confident. You speak so articulately. You speak with so much strength and assertiveness in your voice, right? Because that is genuinely me.
Yes.
When I'm having an argument with you, I speak in the exact same way and you automatically hate me. You're being a bitch. You're being aggressive. You're being so over the top. But I'm expressive. This is how I speak. but you love me on stage as this expressive person and you hate me in an intimate conversation when we're arguing. And both of those people are the same. And so often I think that it's so easy to admire someone and think, wow, I want to be like them.
Yes.
But then I also hate being like me sometimes because I don't mean to be aggressive. I don't mean to be so expressive. But if I'm saying to you, like, you really annoyed me, I'm never going to be the person that's like, you really upset me. Right. Because never on this podcast do I speak like this. Imagine if I spoke like this, how boring it would be. But I speak like this and people enjoy it. So it's really difficult also for people like you and I who really enjoy being in these roles, who love using our hands. Throughout this conversation, we've both used our hands so much. But when we're in an argument, has someone ever told you, like, why are you reacting like that? Like, what's wrong with you? Calm down. I'm like, I'm not angry. Half the time I'm like, I'm just passionate. I'm not even that mad. But then I just don't know how to respond.
Wow.
Do you get that? Do people say that to you?
No.
Okay, classic.
I've never
just
had
me
that.
Then.
But I'll tell you why. With everything that I write about and speak about, I really do think getting sober when I was 24, so I'm 32 now for context, it really kickstarted this process of me having to be really aware of what is working and not working for me. So I've had a chance to really test out, and I've always been obsessed with communication anyway, and especially that idea of behavioral flexibility. I've always been fascinated by it because even before I knew what it was, I had to do it within my home. Who I was in my home was very different from being outside. Who I was, so I was able to, some people could call it shape-shifting. And I think there were times in which it could be shape-shifting in a negative way, but I think it's just behavioral adaptability.
Correct.
Where you know your audience and who you are. And I think there's also a thing where when you speak a different language and you're from a different culture and from a very different type of upbringing, you have to navigate different spaces and different ways of being. But I think behavioral flexibility is what you're talking about, where there's a realization in that the Shivani on stage and how you are, those traits and characteristics, ways of being, if it's translated to an intimate situation with you and your partner in your home, trying to resolve a conflict, they can't be the same.
100%.
They can't be the same. There's also a thing about a certain softness that is required. And again, if we go back to the thing we were talking about where we might believe on a subconscious level that if you're being soft and calmer, you're playing into this gender role that's expected of you culturally, when actually that's not true. It's not true. It just means you're in this, especially when you're with a masculine partner, there's just a yin and yang that's needed, a polarity that's needed in order for you to navigate things. So I think because I really do experience the world more so now through that lens of polar opposites and polarity, I know that the version of me that I am in different contexts is not useful in other contexts. So I've really learned, and I do it in every interaction, to just adapt what's necessary and not. And that's why in the book I talk a lot about tone and delivery, because it doesn't mean you're being, again, fake or not being yourself. It means you're just allowing different parts of you that already exist to come forward.
So true.
And just take the stage to be like, okay, this version of Shivani is needed in this conversation. The other one can take a little bit of a backseat. I can be softer in this interaction. Because if we're just the same in every single one, I promise you, it's always going to work against you. That's just what it is.
So true. And I think, like, if I was talking to my grandma, I'd be much softer.
Yes.
And I don't think I'm being fake.
Yeah.
So it's not like I do, but what you were saying is very, very, very applicable. I think I've learned to definitely differentiate, but I think sometimes I do naturally be like that. It's just natural.
And it's interesting how even your body went like this, which makes me think sometimes it's to do with safety. Yeah. If you're not feeling safe enough in the conversation, your defenses can 100%. Come up. Because for me, the blind spots that I had, which were revealed mainly in the past couple of years, were in my romantic relationship. Nowhere else.
Wow.
Nowhere else. Because that's where there's a lot of, not that he made me feel unsafe, but where there's a lot more vulnerability for me. So all of those things that I thought were done, were fine, I was able to really see them because my defenses would come up more because it's someone that I'm more afraid to damage the way they view me, you know?
Wow.
And also it's someone that I don't want to be rejected by. I don't want to be abandoned by them. There's someone that it's sort of my gateway in our commitment as monogamous partners. They're the person that I experience desire and sensuality and attraction with. So when they point out a flaw or we're in conflict, I'm like, no. So there's that too. There's certain relationships that will just reveal parts of you that will never be revealed elsewhere.
So true. I have like 15,000 more things to say, but
we need to do a part 2.
I really think we just have to do a part 2 at this point. Like there's like part 5. We need to do a part for every chapter in the book.
Oh my God. We need to start a new show.
We so should do that. Although I don't think anyone would listen every week because it would just be like me and you like,
are you kidding me? Everyone would be.
We should just record our conversations.
That's what we need to do. Well, I should be a guest every quarter.
I really think that would be really helpful, actually. I think we should do that.
I should be a resident guest.
You should be.
I would love to be a resident guest.
Before we close, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Okay, let me think about this.
That's what I love about Africa. When I ask her a question, she doesn't just jump into it.
I do. I have to think. It's something that came through in a conversation with my partner, who has been my biggest teacher for the past nearly 3 years. And it's not advice in the sort of standard way, but it was a big teaching that can be used as advice. And it was essentially, be careful, and you can swap this out with mindful, whichever you prefer. Be careful to not hold people to standards that you can't even meet yourself. And I found that to be very eye-opening. And not even just external standards like material things or whatever, or standards in the typical way, but a certain level of how someone carries themselves, how someone lives out their values, how someone is in integrity with who they are as a person, standards in that way, character-based standards. Be careful that you're not expecting everyone else to maintain this high standard that you can't even maintain yourself. And I found that to be very powerful because I think it applies to so many things. We have so many expectations of other people. People should do this and they should meet me in this way and they should treat me in this way. But again, if we use that idea that I said earlier of looking at the results in your own life, are you meeting those same behavioral standards? Are you meeting those same character standards? Or do you expect everyone else to meet them for you without you having to do it yourself?
So powerful. This conversation and every conversation with you always helps me grow into a completely different person. And I say that honestly because every time we have a conversation, it's not just this conversation. I think about it for the next 3-4 days. And then I learn a new idea and I think of a new thing and I challenge myself. And even throughout this, I thought, God, I've done that wrong. And God, I should do this differently. And I think that's what I really want from this podcast, is for people to listen and watch and think, wow, I've just learned something new. Not only about the way in which I behave, but the way in which I react, the way in which I talk, the way in which everything. And I just thank you so much for coming on this podcast and for coming into my life.
Thank you. I can't wait to listen back to this. I can't wait to listen back to this and take notes. I am so grateful for our friendship and our sisterhood. And I expand every time that we sit together, every single time. It's honestly a gift. And I know that it's going to be a gift for so many people. Just thank you. I love you.
Love you. Now we can touch.